Hi students, today we're going to start going over chapter 16. I'm going to start on page 783, so go ahead and open your book there if you're not already. I wanted to go over a couple of vocabulary words before we get started today. Chapter 16 is all about statistics and data and how we organize numbers into charts and tables in ways that make sense. So the first word I want to talk about on your vocabulary list or words is a frequency table. So this is an example of a frequency table. On frequency tables, they usually give a range, like here we see the temperature from 36 to 40 degrees. A lot of times they'll give you a whole list of numbers and you would have to go through and look at them and see how many numbers were between 36 and 40, and you make tally marks. So you go through your numbers and you put tally marks of how many occur, and then the frequency is just how many tally marks you had. Writing down the number just makes it a lot easier than having to sit here and count tallies over and over again. So that is a frequency table. Today we're going to look at how to make histograms. Frequency tables and histograms are related because usually we take the range from our frequency table, like here 36 to 40, and I could put that on a histogram. Now histograms, a lot of times people get those confused with bar graphs. Histograms and bar graphs are different. Bar graphs, or bar charts as this is called, have gaps in between the bars. Histograms do not have gaps. The other main difference is that a bar graph would have categories at the bottom, like this one has China, US, France. Sometimes when you guys were younger, you probably did color graphs, like what was your favorite color? And you would have green and orange and different things at the bottom. Histograms have numbers or ranges of numbers at the bottom. So that's our main difference between those two. Later on in this chapter, we'll take a look at box plots, which you guys have seen on your study islands, and we'll talk about how we read these. And we've looked at quartiles some, but we'll look at those more in depth in the next couple of lessons and talk about how our quartiles and our box plots are related. And we'll also go over the rest of these vocabulary words later. But today, our main focus is frequency tables, and we're going to look at histograms as well. So if you turn to today's Solve and Share, you can see that this is a yellow page, which means it is a review, and it says we're looking at frequency tables and histograms. So it says a 6th grade class recorded the number of letters in their first and last names combined. What was the most common length? What was the least common length? Make a table to solve this problem. So on my next page, I've made a table. You guys can fill this in right here. I don't have enough space to be able to do that, so that's why I have it on the next page. What I did was I went through and I looked at how many letters were in each name. So the smallest one I saw was 8, and the biggest one I saw was 19. So I went down through and I just put 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, and 19. Nobody had 18 letters in their name, so I didn't include that in my table. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go through and count and make tallies of how many people had each of these letters in their name. So when I look at this page, I'm going to go through and count. So when I look, there is one number 8 that I see. So I'm going to put 1 tally mark. I know that's really crooked. I'm trying to write with my mouse. I apologize. For number 8, then I'm going to go through and count how many people had 9 letters in their name. So again, there's 1. I think it's super helpful to go through and mark out the numbers as you use them. That way, when you're done, you can make sure you've used them all. For 10, I see 1, 2. So I'm going to put 2. For 11, there's 1, 2. So I'm going to put 2 tally marks on my 11, so on and so forth. So you guys kind of get the idea of how to do this. So you guys, like I said, can make your table underneath here. I just didn't have the space to do that. So I saw 3 people had 12. I believe there's 2 that have 13. There's 2 that have 14. There's 3 people that had 15 letters in their name. There were 2 that had 16. one that had 17. Again, there was nobody with 18, so I didn't even include that in my table, and there was one with 19. So the solve and share question asked us what were the least number of letters in people's names, or what was the least common amount of letters in a name, and what was the most common. So when I look down through, the ones that have one letter would be the least, one tally would be the least common. So for the least common amount of letters to have in your name, so least common would be if you had 8 letters, because only one person had that, 9 letters, because again, one person had 9 letters in their name, 17 letters, and 19 letters. Those would be our least common. If we wanted the most common amount of letters to have in a name, I'm looking for where I have the most tallies. So there were 3 students that had 12 letters in their name and 3 students that had 15. So the most common amount of letters in a name was 12 and 15. So if you need to pause the video to get this chart down, feel free to do so now. I'm going to go ahead and look back at the look back problem. So you guys can fill in that chart right there. Again, it's right here if you need to pause the video and get that down. I'll kind of leave it right there. So on the look back, if I scroll down, it says, how does organizing the data help you see the number of letters that occur most often? Explain. So this would be my explanation. I think data can be seen easily when values are organized in numerical order. This allows you to see when a value occurs the most often. So on my table that I made on the previous page, it was really easy to look down through and see how many people had used that many letters 3 times, which was the most. It was really easy to look at that and see. And I think anytime we have things in order from least to greatest, like we started with the 8 at the top of our chart and went down to the 19, I think it helps when we have things in order. So you can use my explanation here, or you can write your own. If you need to pause the video to get that down, that's fine, but I do expect writing here when I check your books tomorrow. On the next page, it says, how can you make and use a frequency table and a histogram? So Mr. Maxwell timed the cross-country team in a 2-mile run. He wants to organize the data in a frequency table. A frequency table shows the number of times a data value or values occurs in the data set. How can Mr. Maxwell make a frequency table? So the first thing they do are give us the times of his runners, okay? So the first runner finished it in 16 minutes 45 seconds. And if we look, none of these are in order, and they're all kind of different. So the first thing they tell us to do is organize it in a data table. So they make these values. So because all of the numbers are kind of scattered, you can pick to go from 14 minutes to 15 minutes and 59 seconds. You wouldn't have to necessarily do the numbers that they picked, but your numbers should go by the same amount. So like this would be, I'm going from 14 minutes to almost 16 minutes. It needs to go by the same amount of minutes. So if we look at each one, they go up. The other thing that's important are that our numbers don't overlap. So I can't have 16 here and then 16 here, because then if somebody ran exactly 16 minutes, I don't know, do I need to put my tally here or in this one? So when we're making a frequency table, we need to make sure that the values that we pick don't overlap, okay? So he went from 14 minutes to 15 minutes and 59 seconds. So then the next step in making this is just to go through and pick all the times that were between 14 minutes and 15 minutes 59 seconds and put our tally marks. After you have all your tally marks, that's when you go back through and count them to put your frequency. Now, how do I take this and put it into a histogram? So they give us step-by-step directions down here. It tells us our first step is to title the graph. So they put team times because this is the amount of time that their team runs the 2-mile run. The second thing is to choose a scale for your vertical axis. So they put number of runners, and they just went from 0 to 10. Okay, if we look 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, they have 12 runners, but all 12 of them didn't run the same time, so it doesn't need to go up to 12. If we look at our frequency, the highest frequency we had was 6, so really they could have cut this chart off at 6, but your vertical axis needs to go up by the same amount, and it is going to be based off of how tall your frequencies are. Then it says list the time intervals along the horizontal axis. So then you're taking the numbers that were on your frequency table, the scales that you use to make your tallies, and you're just putting them on the bottom of your graph. So they had 14 minutes to 15:59, 16 minutes to 17:59, and 18, and so forth. Then after you've done that, then you look and see, okay, how many runners ran in 14 minutes? So we look at our table and there were 4 people. So we make a bar going up to 4. When we look at our next time slot, there were 6 people. So we make a bar touching the first bar that goes up to 6. And then the third bar was 2. So they went up to 2. So that is how you make a histogram. So it says, how are frequency tables and histograms alike and how are they different? So this is what I would say. Both showed data visually. Frequency tables use tally marks and numbers displayed in rows and columns. Histograms display data in groups and display data, this should say groupings, in bar graph form. So this is my answer. If you have a different answer, that's fine, but make sure that you have an answer written there when I check your books tomorrow. On this one, it says, look at the histogram on the previous page. What does the tallest bar tell you? So when we look at the histogram of the team times, they want to know what that bar that goes up to 6 is telling us. So when I look at this, I see that more people had running times between 16 minutes and 17 minutes 59 seconds than any other time. Okay, now it wants to know how many runners had times of 18 minutes or more. So when we looked at that chart, if they were at 18 minutes or more, I can see there were just 2 people that had that. So I'm going to put 2 runners. Now it wants to know how would intervals of 3 minutes change the appearance of the histogram. So if I took these numbers and made them go for 3 minutes instead of 2 minutes, it's going to give me less columns. It's going to give me less bars in my graph because I'm not going to have as much data. My data is going to be spread out a little bit differently. So I'm just going to put that there would only be 2 intervals. That's how it would be different. So instead of having our 3 bars and our 3 intervals, there would only be 2 because if we split up the time into groups of 3 minutes, then it would go from 14 minutes to 17 and then from 17 to 19. So we are going to do some of this together and you guys are going to do some of this on your own. So I'm going to help you set up the table and then you guys are going to try the histogram on your own and answering these questions on your own. So when we look at this, they are going up by 49 each time. So when you fill in this table, I've got to do 200 plus 49. So this one's going to go from 200 to 249. Like that. And then my next number, we said they can't overlap. So if I go one higher than that, I'd be at 250. And again, I'm writing with my mouse. I know it's really, really bad. Bear with me. And then if I add 49 to that, I would be at 299. So the same thing over here, you're just copying down these same things because you're going to make your bars to match. So when you finish, you should have 4 bars because you have 4 frequency ranges here. So then what we're going to do is we're going to take these numbers and just put tallies. So when I had 125 songs, that's going to go in my first one. 289 is going to go in the last one. 115 would go in the first one, so on and so forth. So you guys kind of see how to do that. When I get finished, you should have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's going to be 5 numbers that fit here. So on my table, my first bar should go up to 5. Just like that. Okay, your second bar should touch your first bar, so if you need to make yours a little thicker than mine is, that's fine. But I think you guys should be able to go through and mark the numbers and fill this in and fill this in as well. And I want you guys to try to answer questions 6, 7, 8, and 9 on your own. On the back, I only want you guys to do number 12. So number 12 is, again, making a frequency table and a histogram, and you're using these numbers. So the only thing you need to do on the back is number 12, okay? So you can cross everything else out. So you're doing a histogram and a frequency table on the front, and a histogram and a frequency table on the back. So I will see you guys tomorrow in class. I'll check to make sure you have this done. Talk to you later. Bye.